Video games and snowboarding, my two favorite hobbies. What the fuck could go wrong with this scenario? So naturally, when EA announced that SSX was returning from the dead, I immediately knew I was going to be buying this shit right off the bat. Without hesitation, I was going to buy this motherfucker instantly to relive the glory days of snowboarding. And right off the bat, let me just say this, gameplay in the background is not my best work by far. Obviously, not playing a game in so long and trying to remember all the controls and all the nuances of SSX, it took me a long time to remember. But hey, like I said, for the majority of these games, I'm only returning one time to get a couple minutes of footage, and then I'm never going to return to them again. So only this one time I had was to try and get medals in this game, and obviously I didn't do it. Now, in any event, for people who have played the SSX series from the beginning, you know the greatest video game of all time was SSX Tricky. Period. There is no equal. Fuck your Half-Life, fuck The Last of Us, fuck Mario, fuck Zelda, fuck Halo, and just because I'm saying a fuck you to everyone, might as well throw in the YouTube order so it doesn't feel left out. How many of y'all thought I forgot about that shit? Hell no, I don't forget about that shit, man. But anyway, SSX Tricky was one of the most entertaining and brilliantly designed games back on PlayStation 2. Snowboarding was still a fringe sport back then. It wasn't in the Olympics, Shaun White was just getting his career started, so the sport wasn't fully mainstream yet. It was gaining in popularity, so after the first SSX came out and received a fair bit of decent reviews for a first-time game, SSX Tricky blew it out of the water. Blew it out of the water. SSX3 then came along and did everything even better from a controls to graphics standpoint to the scale of the game and variety of the game. They added more, but they had to sacrifice a bit of the tricky personality to do it. Instead of the crazy locations like snowboarding in Hawaii or whatever the fuck it was, now SSX3 had one gigantic mountain. Awesome idea, but you lost just a touch of the flair that Tricky had in their game. After SSX3, EA released SSX on Tour, an absolute abysmal game. Holy fucking shit. You know, if there ever was a game to kill a franchise, that was it. The gameplay itself was okay, but man, so many decisions that game made were fucking awful. They added skiing for starters, man. Skiing in a snowboarding game. They made you make a character which had limited options in this motherfucker. So my character looked like some Indian guy up in this bitch. And then you had to use this made character as opposed to taking the many characters that the game actually offered. They introduced the sketchpad artwork in attempts to appeal to kids who actually snowboard. You know, instead of going for the mass appeal and trying to stay neutral with themes to appeal to everyone, no. They went for the sketchpad kids that already do snowboarding. They aren't the ones buying the game, motherfucker. The people buying the game are the masses out there who just enjoy snowboarding as a fringe sport. So as you can imagine, SSX on Tour flopped big time. Big time. Sales-wise, it bombed out, and it was pretty much the start of the downfall of the EA Sports big studio. They went on to release a few more games, you know, FIFA Street, NBA Street, and I believe they had an SSX game on the Wii and whatnot, but the writing was on the wall after on Tour. EA closed the studio down just 3 years later after massive losses that game took. So, what the fuck does all of this have to do with this SSX game? Well, pretty much everything. Because EA closed down the big studio due to the poor sales of the arcade-style games and shit like that, snowboarding didn't have a home anymore. By that point, the sport had become mainstream. It was in the Olympics in multiple events. It was at the X Games as the signature sport. Shaun White had become the face of the sport, similar to what Tony Hawk was to skateboarding. And now you have a much bigger audience that wants snowboarding. EA decided to go back to snowboarding one more time with SSX Deadly Descent, or whatever they want to call this shit. Sometimes they call it SSX, sometimes they call it Deadly Descent. I don't fucking know, man. But anyway, anyone that saw the very first trailer thought it looked like a Call of Duty trailer. Oh man, the flack that shit took was hilarious, man. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 had this trailer with Soap climbing up an ice wall, whatever the fuck. And now you got these motherfuckers, they're riding down almost the same exact ice wall that Soap was climbing up, man. Oh, that shit was fucking funny. They called this shit SSX Call of Duty Edition. But anyway, EA promised this game wasn't going to be serious. Although the trailer looked very serious, they promised it was going to be the fun-loving game that appealed to the mass audience like SSX Tricky and SSX3. It was not going to be SSX on Tour. Everything wrong with SSX on Tour would be fixed here. It was going to be a mix of SSX3, where you had massive mountains to explore, and SSX Tricky with wild locations with multiple massive mountains. Essentially, everything that made the prior two games good and bad, they learned from, and they would either add to this game or eliminate in this game. So, did they succeed? Depends on what you view as a success. Personally, this isn't Tricky. This isn't even close to SSX Tricky, but It's not SSX on tour either. It's certainly not that awful. It's somewhere in between with some good, a lot of bad, and a whole bunch of fun mixed in. So, let's start with first the quality. The characters we played all these years are back. Mac, Zoe, Simon, Kaori, Elise, Moby, and even Eddie as DLC up in this bitch. The crazy mountains were back, although some took a more serious tone with it with the race events and the Deadly Descents crap. The tricks were as crazy as ever, the handling the game was fun as always, and they even added new stick controls or tricks or whatever the fuck, you know. You could go back to the original controls of the PlayStation 2 era, which is what I preferred, but they advanced the whole control system and shit, but obviously I didn't want to use it. I wanted to go back to the old SSX tricky controls up in this motherfucker, man. They even brought back a version of the Tricky song, which is something every fan wanted from the greatest game of all time. People will know that Run DMC made the song Tricky, and this game did their little mix job and whatnot, but they did keep the song Tricky in it. So overall, this game did an excellent job catering to the longtime fans. However, the game does have its major share of flaws. The main thing being the lack of a true multiplayer experience at the release of the game. Now, although the game added some multiplayer down the road, it was part of a DLC or it was part of a patch or whatever the fuck, at the release of the game, all you can do online was beat your friend's best times or best score. There was no direct mode to play against someone, which was all part of the fun from the original. I remember having the ability to knock a motherfucker over in a race or whatever you needed to do, and then you go about your merry way. You would knock that some bitch down, you would get full Tricky or whatever the fuck it is you needed, but no, in this game, we had none of that shit. Not until the patch that came out in the summer. Really? The summer? You waited 6 months to give people the full multiplayer game that you should have had during launch? Come on, man. How can you do people dirty like that, EA? The best thing about this game was the multiplayer. One of the most enjoyable things you can do was reaching over and punching a motherfucker in his teeth, knocking his ass over, and getting your full Tricky bar launched out and tricked out. Now, you didn't even have that at the launch, man. That is just fucking ridiculous. In addition, the game had no explore mode where you could just ride the mountain at your leisure. You either had to race it or you had to trick it. That's it. They added it later on, similar to how they did with multiplayer, but by that time, why the fuck would people want to explore the maps when we already raced and tricked these motherfuckers out? It made no goddamn sense to do it that way. The storyline was also a bit cheesy, with Griff being the asshole of the group and Zoe being the main character, trying to get the band back together and whatnot, but honestly, they didn't need the half-ass storyline. Just having fun and having the wacky characters like before works fine for the game. No need to go through ridiculous storylines and backlines of all this other bullshit. It wasn't needed. Give us fun characters, give us a mountain, give us cool moves. That's all you need for an SSX game. But my biggest pet peeve in the game were the Deadly Descents. Pretty much what the game was created for. I initially liked the scope of the idea, challenging mountains and whatnot, but each one turned into a gimmick for useless equipment in the game, like thermal goggles to see the landscape, or light to see inside of a dark cave, or whatever the fuck, or extra body armor to prevent injury. Seriously, what the fuck? Almost all of that shit was useless outside of the Deadly Descents on the mountains and shit like that. Maybe the wingsuit would be useful, but the rest of that shit, we didn't fucking need it in the first place, man. I have no idea what the fuck they were thinking with that bullshit, but we didn't need any of that equipment crap. But the best part about all this is that you could skip all the Deadly Descents. You don't like the level? Fuck it, just skip it. No, really, you could bypass every single race, go straight to the end, battle Griff, and that's it. You beat the game. Motherfucker, I think you can even skip him too if you want to. Just call it a day, really. I don't understand the point of that. Why do you put all this content in the game if you're only going to give people the ability to skip it anytime they want without completing it? I mean, why put the shit in the game? Why are you going to put something where people could just say, you know what, fuck it, skip it, go to the end, I don't feel like doing the end, skip it, hey, it's the credit scene. That's basically what people could have done with the skip feature. It makes absolutely no sense to be able to skip entire levels at any given point. Now, one other little bit of trivia that occurs with this game, and it happens to be a side note in the history of Call of Duty versus SSX. The day this game released was the very last day that I played Modern Warfare 3. You know the reason why I know this? The day that SSX released is the day the first DLC released for Modern Warfare 3, and that was back when you had to buy that Call of Duty Elite crap. You didn't have to buy it, but if you chose to purchase the Call of Duty Elite crap, you got all the DLC prepaid, and that was back when they were doing monthly DLC. You remember when instead of just getting 4 maps in a map pack or whatever, in a zombie map or whatever they want to do with that stupid shit, you would get 2 maps a month, and then 1 map next month, and another map the next month. They did that shit for Modern Warfare 3, and it was absolutely fucking annoying. But the very first DLC that they released that I had already pre-purchased purchased, I decided I was gonna download. I believe one was Piazza and the other one was like a Plaza, whatever the fuck it was. It looked like a Central Park kind of map and shit like that. I remember downloading those maps the same day SSX came out. I played 6 games online in Modern Warfare 3, 3 on each map, and I was like, fuck this, I ain't never going back to this motherfucker. Even after prepaying for that shit, I decided I was not going to go back to Modern Warfare 3. So as soon as I played those 6 games, I took the game out of my console, never returned to that shit, threw SSX in the console along with some other games that came after it, and that was the final day I ever played Modern Warfare 3, and I never went back to that motherfucker. So that's just a little bit of fun trivia for you guys based on some of the Call of Duty shit that I've been talking about, man. But anyway, at the end of the day, I was a bit happy again to play SSX, and I was a bit disappointed in what the content offered. If they were to release a sequel, I really hope they roll out multiplayer from day one because this game needed it. The ability to play with your friends is a big reason why people will play a game like this. So this is something that I really hope EA had a chance to learn from, and they will fix down the road if they feel like making another one of these games, because I do feel like this definitely deserves another game, and it definitely deserves a chance to get back all the popularity it had back in the days of SSX Tricky and SSX3. But anyways, that does it for this week's video. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.